Welcome to Real Community Talks, where real conversations with community influencers are made available to everyone. I'm your host, Matt DeSilva, and on today's episode, we have probably the only person who could ever out-talk me in a conversation, my buddy Riaz Mohammed on the show today. Riaz, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me, Matthew.
So for those of you who may not know who Riaz is, and you're gonna have to get ready for the super long list because he was super, like when I did the episode preparation, he gave me like 3 things. I'm like, you are way more than just your education and your field of study. So Riaz is a researcher. He's a Doctor of Chiropractic Student in a second year of 4 years at Canadian Memorial Chiropractic College, which is the most prestigious chiropractic college in Canada and, as you mentioned, arguably in the world.
Yes.
Is also a creative. He's a Bachelors of Kinesiology graduate from Guelph Humber. He is a health and fitness promotion graduate with Humber College as well. I guess you did the joint program like we mentioned. Is the vice president of the Student Canadian Chiropractic Association, a member of student council, among other things he does within his school and his community, is a community development advocate, and just an all-around humanitarian who just has a heart for people and, you know, no matter where they are in life. So with that, why don't we kind of segue into what's your origin story? So who is Riaz Mohammed?
Wow. Yeah. Well, thank you for that gracious opening. It sounds way more fancy than it is, but
Too modest.
I started off growing up in a small community. A large community in Toronto called Parkdale. It was a lower funded area. It was a very depressed area as well. But life over there was great. I mean, although there was a lot of things that you don't have growing up over there because it's obviously a lower income area. It was phenomenal, just the companionship with family and growing up. It was nice. Fast forward to 12 years later, where I moved here to Malton, was a similar situation. Just the dynamic was it's a lot smaller here, and it was more of a community feel here when I got to Malton.
Everyone knew everyone kind of thing.
Absolutely. It was sort of like you knew your neighbors. In Parkdale, there was so much people coming in and out, you just didn't know who was who, and it was sort of you were in a big city, but you were kind of limited to the people you knew, and you're kind of suppressed sometimes for expanding because people were in and out all the time.
Yeah, for sure. So you started in Parkdale, you went to Malton. You know, obviously we met at Lincoln M. Alexander in high school. So after high school, I know like a lot of our friends, we went straight into, you know, college or university right after high school. But you actually took a year off, and you know, I actually met you one day in Food Basics. Surprising to see you there. And a lot of people have that idea that they have to go into university and college right away. Why did you take that 1 year off instead of going and just doing the like, I guess, the social norm what everyone was doing?
Mm-hmm. Good question. Actually, with that, I would say I did take the year off, and it was one of the best years of my life in terms of discovery and finding out who I am and discovering what I wanted with life. I think, as I mentioned with you earlier, that I think that we create this social norms that we need to do things right away, or we need to do things at a certain age, and that really limits us sometimes, or it sends us down paths that are not desirable at times. I know that we have this whole saying. I know when I told people I wanted to take the year off from high school, especially friends, they were like, "Are you crazy? Don't go to university right away or go to college. You're never gonna want to go." And I took the year off for a number of reasons. Firstly, my grandfather had passed that year.
Oh wow.
I was applying to programs and didn't know what program I really wanted to get into, so it was more so confusion on my behalf. And I think that sometimes you're rushed and you're pushed to certain things. You're just uncertain at times, and it kind of limits the way you think. With that being said, I always knew I wanted to get in somewhere in science, and I took science in high school, but I just didn't know where I wanted to end off. So with that being said, I took that year off, and that year was a discovery year for me. I started working. I worked at Food Basics, like you mentioned, and some other part-time jobs as well. And I gained a lot out of these part-time jobs in terms of my professionalism and my punctuality. So there was a skill set that I did receive from there. However, I did realize that this is not where I want to be in life, and it's important to identify where you want to be. And I didn't know exactly where I wanted to be, but I identified that I just didn't want to be over there. Yeah. So it was nice because it kind of gave me the mentality to tell myself, you know what, I'm not going to stay here. This is just a phase in my life, and I don't want to ever stay stagnant. And from that point, I started jumping around. So I started working other places. I tried to figure out what I wanted to do with life. So that was sort of like, the kind of pushing power to head for or to send me where I wanted to head to.
Definitely. So I have a few friends who've gone, straight from, like, let's say, not even fully completing a bachelor's, but even in second year going to medical school or going to law school, all that kind of stuff. So you obviously did the college diploma, you did the university route, and now you're doing your doctorate. So do you feel like any of those were wasted experiences, or do you feel like there's some things that you learned at that level that maybe you don't get to practice at this level now?
Absolutely. I think that nothing's a wasted experience, actually. Whether it be my story of starting off in university in conjunction with college and kind of working your way up, everything we do is a learning experience, I think. And once you get something out of it, you get a lesson, or it becomes worth your while, right?
Yeah.
So with that being said, there were things that I didn't appreciate, or components that I didn't quite understand when I was at certain places of life, but they help mold and shape the person I am today, right? So these choices and these decisions and these actions that I get from, or whatever I take out from these institutions, as well as my experience, kind of dictate where I want to be. So
Yeah.
in terms of the hands-on skills, I could never replace that in terms of practical exams. We had a lot of that in undergrad, and it was a repeat doing my doctorate, and it helps because your interaction with people, the ability to talk to people, the interaction in order to be able to talk and interact with patients and clients was something built and fostered in undergrad and only strengthened when I was doing my doctorate.
Yeah.
Whereas some people that may have not had that opportunity to work in a practical setting probably had a lot of theoretical knowledge, maybe that superseded mine, but with that being said, they didn't have the skill sets that I've had, and that guided me to where I am. So with that being said, just to kind of address that question earlier, I think that everything is a learning experience, and for me, I try to live with no regrets and try to not regret anything that I do. So I go outside and I make a decision, and that decision may at the time be perceived as a correct decision. I'll look back and say, well, maybe I would approach it differently because I'm at a different stage in my life. But I said at that time, I took a rational decision and I made that decision. And therefore, I am wholeheartedly in agreement with that.
Awesome. So now you're doing your doctorate in chiropractic. So can you kind of debunk some myths about wanting to be a doctor? From I know a lot of kids from, like even age 3, they're, wanting to be a doctor, wanting to be a police officer, wanting to be a firefighter, right? But when they actually get to the age of applying, it's more so sensationalized than they realize the actual commitment level of of what that takes, and I guess the toll on you as a human being. Like, we've talked about this before, like how I think student loans forgive some of the people who are going in the medical field their loan, and I'm like, just that period of studying alone is worth the allowance that they give them back, because it's hectic, right? So can you kind of debunk some myths about trying to become a doctor and how that experience is?
First and foremost, I'd start off with, it's a long path and a long journey to become any sort of doctor or healthcare professional here. And any sort of higher education, I think, takes a lot of dedication, time, commitment, perseverance. With that being said, it depends on how much you want something, right? You may hit some road bumps ahead, maybe failed courses or pushback from other places, or maybe your grades are not high enough. Whatever it may be, you may have pushback. But with that being said, if you have the passion and the drive to do so and to get where you want to get to, that passion will guide you to where you need to be. So with that being said, yeah, we look at it retrospectively too. It's a lot of time you have to put in, and there's a lot of sleepless nights for me. There's a lot of times where you're juggling twice or sometimes 3 times the course load that you did in undergrad, but you look back and you never lose hindsight of where you want to be. My passion started off with wanting to help people, and it was guided and fostered through this time, and it's only solidified each time I hit a roadblock. I'm like, you are here to make people feel better, and you're going into a profession because you honestly wholeheartedly care for the holistic health of someone. And I never lose hindsight of that. So there are times where you want to give up. There's times that you hit roadblocks, but then you start remembering why you decided to get into a program like this, why you decided to do what you want to do, and that passion and drive actually pushes you further.
For sure.
You look back at people sometimes and they say, well, you know what, I don't want to do what I'm doing. And I think it's indicative of sometimes we get into something impulsively, or we decide too quickly on heading to one place, and we're just not sure if we want that in life, right? So with the fact of the matter is, saying I want to be an engineer is nice, I want to be a doctor is nice, but we need to really, solidify this and take the time, hence the year that I took off.
Yeah.
But take some time and really sit down and understand and identify if this is something that we want to do. And if it's something that we want to do, our passions will guide us. Whatever roadblocks we hit, it'll guide us towards where we want to be. For sure.
So with all the different, I guess, breakdowns of what kind of doctor you can be, why chiropractic? Like, why was that your thing?
Good question. Actually, it stems from my first interaction with my chiropractor. He's my current chiropractor now, and he's been my chiropractor for countless years. He treated my father actually for a pathology in his back, but my father had actually gone in to see the chiropractor. When he went to see the chiropractor, I had actually gone in with him, and I remember the chiropractor asking me some questions and just asking me about myself. He asked me, what do you like doing? And at the time I liked running. So I said, I'm a runner. And he asked me, do you ever have pain? Mm-hmm. And I simply said, yeah, I have pain on my feet. I had some underlying pathology on my feet from running and just the sore and achy muscles at times. And he looks at me and he said, I can help you with that. Mm. And I look at him and I remember laughing, and I laughed out loud. It was probably obnoxious at the time, but I laughed out loud and I said, somebody that cracks backs, how can they help me with my feet? And he's the only practitioner that actually took the time to walk me to an actual chart, and the chart shows the kinetic chain, which is de-alignment of the feet can cause de-alignment of other portions of the body, which can lead to many different pathology in the body, and it can lead to muscle dysfunction, things like that. Wow. So it was the first time I felt like I wasn't part of the system. I wasn't just a patient, but I was an actual human being. Yeah. And after that, I just remember booking my first session with him, and his room was packed with people. And he actually came out in person. Wow. Got me and brought me into the room.
That's awesome.
And although there were so much people in the waiting room, he never rushed me. It was a conversation he had. It looks like he wanted to get to know me as a person.
For sure.
And for that reason, he's become my mentor and my idol. I aspire to practice like him. And just a quick synopsis of what he does, it's not only back pathology. It's after my research on chiropractic and entering the field, I realized that, back pain and back pathology is something that is prevalently dealt with a chiropractor. But it's more than that. Chiropractors deal with pain. They deal with MSK. They deal with joints. They deal with movement. Wow. It encompasses much more. They're professionals in both MSK and spinal dysfunction. Wow. So with that being said, I was mesmerized by that. Yeah. Not only the component of dealing with pathology, yes, but the component of a chiropractor actually taking the time to get to know somebody as a person. Yeah. And I thought that really, truly constitutes holistic health.
That's awesome, because I'm not trying to make a broad sweeping statement about doctors, but everyone's had that experience where you've gone and you feel more like a ticket, like next. But I think what you learn from your mentor as a doctor, and even how you want to be, we've talked about this before, like even though you may be a specific type of doctor, it would be crazy for you to not be like, well, I've also noticed this. Like, let's say, you're dealing with someone's ankle, but then you realize that they have a skin disease, like you were mentioning, right? Yeah. So even that is something that's super important to you too, right?
Absolutely. I think just in terms of the whole healthcare system, there's bad and good everywhere. Sometimes you get some great practitioners, whether it's medical doctors, chiropractors, physiotherapists. Sometimes you get some that are subpar, and unfortunately, these interactions are not very pleasant for us. With that being said, a lot of healthcare professionals, such as chiropractors, need the basis and the understanding of other portions of the body so that we can identify when something is not within our scope of practice. And so the case is that I'm learning about skin disease or cardiovascular health, or I'm learning about palpating organs or percussing organs. And people are mesmerized and they're like, why are you doing that? Aren't you a muscle expert? But you still need to be able to identify other pathology. If someone's coming in with heart-related issues and it's, presenting as pain down the arm, can I identify that as a chiropractor I need to be able to identify that first of all, but differentiate that from muscle pain and that of cardiovascular pain. So it's quite intensive, and I think for any sort of healthcare practitioner out there, the underlying foundation, especially with a chiropractor, the underlying foundation of the sciences and the alternative classes you take, like biochemistry and patho and other things like that, that people don't anticipate chiropractic students taking, but we do, because we kind of have to build that foundation of how to identify things and to truly be an integral part of the healthcare system.
For sure. So, non-serious question. Obviously, you love being a healthcare practitioner. Obviously, you like helping patients and being that person who helps resolve issues or flag them. But aren't you also in chiropractic because you just love cracking backs? Like, do you just like love the feeling when that you did an adjustment and that pain's just relieved? Like,
well, who doesn't? Who doesn't like to just hear crack all over, right? I mean, to be quite honest with you, prior to chiropractic, who didn't just like to crack their necks?
I do it all the time. Okay, let me see if I do it. Maybe that might pick that up.
It's just an awesome feeling, right?
Yeah. So I'm just, because I'm not maybe I'm a creep and maybe I'm just gonna lose like viewers after this episode, but I'm that person who likes watching like those sport chiropractic adjustments where you see like on YouTube, and it's like someone goes to my YouTube history, like, yeah, this guy's pretty weird. So obviously, even in talking about having to know about the different pathology in different parts of the body and what can lead to what, how do you stay so up to date in the field? I feel like in the medical field, things are always changing, things are always advancing. What we thought was for sure the procedure we have to do now is like totally wrong. Like, how do you stay up to date with all that?
I think the health field, for sure, it happens a lot, likewise with every other field, but just staying up to date with the literature and partially my passion for research. I love reading articles. I love going back, and I kind of like doing my own investigation where I look at something and they say the sky is blue. I really try to investigate why the sky is blue and if it is indeed blue, right? So getting a little philosophical with you here, but I kind of jump back and forth and I try to do my own investigative work, but there's also all these means and these avenues out there where you can actually go out there and look at guidelines and certain up-to-date practices. With that being said, the little academic in me likes going and reading other things and outside sources and trying things. And I think it's also indicative of going out there in the field and kind of seeing what everybody wants and how everybody practices, right? Because you may like doing one thing, but then your community or the people that you treat in your community doesn't like the thing that you offer, and therefore you have to adapt to that community, right?
For sure. One thing that I always find so interesting when we talk about it is not just like physical procedures, but how the mind is a healer in itself. So why don't you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. The mind has a great effect over a lot of things. I think the mind is something that I've always been intrigued with ever since I was a child, and I always like investigating what makes us think the way we think and why the mind has such an effect on people. And I know I was reading a study a while back that 2 sugar pills are better than 1 sugar pill for ulcer, and 1 sugar pill is better than no sugar pills for ulcer. And so when we come to the notion of what is a sugar pill doing, it's just a placebo pill, it's not doing anything, but the mind has such a profound effect that it actually helps or aids in the healing of the body through a sugar pill, right? So the mind overrides things, and this is what I find quite intriguing. And you look at things like if you image the people's stomach or the participant's stomach in these studies, physiologically they do better. Their tissues have less damage than those that don't take sugar pills.
That's crazy.
And so it comes to I think we were talking about this earlier where we was talking about treatment and therapy, where sometimes people say, well, that's not therapy, or this is not therapy. But then we look at the overall dynamic of it. And for me, if someone is being administered something, or somebody is told that this can help you, as long as it's not doing harm to the body, it's worth a shot. Anything becomes therapy at times, right? People use the Bible, for example, as therapy. Some people read the Bible and they're like, oh my God, you know what? I feel so much better, right? And are these people, not correct with what they say? Absolutely not. The Bible can be used as therapy. Anything can be used as therapy. Sure. You read the Bible, it gives you a positive therapeutic effect. You eat an apple and it gives you a positive effect. And you believe this. It's sort of like my grandmother. I'll give you a quick story about my grandmother here. She starts taking melatonin, and very small dosage of melatonin, and this is to help you sleep better.
Okay.
And she, from my research, the melatonin is not as effective, and the dosage that she's taking is not very effective for the reasons she's taking it. She takes it and she says, I feel so much better. I sleep better. I exercise more. And now for me, I see it as this supplement is doing so much for her, and it's making her enthusiastic about things that are healthy. Now, I'd be quite silly if I was trying to take that away from her.
Yeah.
So with that being said, there's many things out there that sometimes we look at it in terms of, no, that's not scientific. That doesn't have research. That's not therapy. In our minds, we have these things to shoot it down. But if it's helping someone feel better or aiding in relief to that person, who are we to take that away, right?
For
So
sure.
I think the mind is just profound in terms of it being able to override things, and the ability for the mind to actually trick the body or whatever it's doing to the body to help it heal better. So I've always been intrigued by that.
Awesome. So, I mean, obviously you're a huge researcher, you're a huge academic. What's something that maybe recently that you've been researching kind of caught your eye, or something that's kind of something that's like an advancement in the field? Anything that we should look forward to in the next few years?
Oh, that's quite interesting.
That's really broad, but
yeah, it's no problem. I've actually been looking at some of the robotics and it's not research per se.
Yeah.
It's my own private research.
For
but
sure.
Been looking at some of the electronics and how it's being incorporated into healthcare and to everyday life. And something, as I was looking at a contact lens recently that you can put into the eye, and it actually has an electronic contact lens.
Wow.
And it kind of gives you a virtual world in your everyday
That's
world.
crazy.
So
Wow.
it seems a little bit absurd, but you know what? 10 years ago, we didn't think that we'd have the technology that we have today, and look where we are. Right?
Yeah,
So,
for sure. So I know me and you always talk about this, and you've kind of mentioned it, within the podcast and explicitly, but I know your life's biggest motto is life is subjective. So what does that mean to you, or what do you mean by that?
I think if anyone can say that they know me very well, they know that phrase is something I always throw out there. Life is subjective. Things are subjective. Everything is subjective. And I always say that it's our perception of things that is different for everyone. I can look at you, for example, and say, wow, love the beard. It's I know that's a touchy subject for you, but
no, that's not a touchy subject.
it's a very nice beard, but somebody else can look at that and be like, oh my God, the beard is too big.
Yeah.
Right? And so everything we do in life is very subjective. I can be walking down the street, for example, and I'm racing to go somewhere, and I'm trying to get there as soon as possible, and looking at the time and saying, oh my God, the weather is cold. It's freezing. I'm trying to get to where I'm getting to. Somebody else can be strolling along and saying, the weather is beautiful today. Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think with that being said, any example we look at, we can look at color, we can look at taste, we can look at anything around us and say it's subjective to that person. I think sometimes in society, we see that in terms of actions of everyone, or everyone's actions. You go to Tim Hortons, for example, and someone's taking an extremely long time, the person serving you back there, and you look at them and you're like, oh my God, they're taking so long. But to you, they're taking long. Subjective to that other person, they are probably moving as quickly as possible because they're now training, right?
For sure.
Or they're moving as quickly as possible because they're having a bad day, right?
Yeah,
So
definitely.
I think everything we do in life is subjective, and I think sometimes we lose hindsight of that. We're very impulsive people. We like to jump on things. We jump out on a lot of things. We look at something and we're very judgy. We judge a lot of times, and we don't take the time to stop and think about what we're saying or what we're doing or how that impacts somebody or how that's subjective to somebody else, right? I can look at you, Matt, and say, hey, that shirt looks ugly, right? But to you...
Throwing shade.
Yeah. But to you, that shirt's beautiful because there's a sentimental value to that.
For sure.
Or there's something that really resonates with that shirt to yourself.
Yeah.
So I think... With that being said, everything that I touch on, I say is subjective.
Life is subjective. That's I was thinking, because with every guest, I added like a unique title, and that's gonna be your title. But I wasn't planning to share this, but it's funny that it happened. you guys won't be able to tell because it'll be edited all well, but we were shooting the first 16 minutes of the episode, and my Zoom recorder just shut down, and my camera said memory was full. I thought I cleared the memory card, and everything bad was happening in that moment. And that, I feel like, don't you feel like that first 16 minutes went really well? And then I was like, wow, this is the 5th episode, and I'm like, nothing's ever gone wrong. And for a second there, I was wanting to get upset and, just like, just start being mad. I'm like, this shouldn't have happened, whatever. I'm like, hey, it's an opportunity to improve on what we said and to expand on our points. So it is authentic. I'm not trying to put it that way, but just like you said, one person can see that, or even the same person in the same moment can see that as, wow, this sucks. The whole interview is going to suck for the rest of the thing. Or you could say, hey, I have a second chance, right? So it's all about perspective and not just evaluating it for the present circumstance, but what good impact can this have, right? So even so, to segue into that, both you and I are huge community people. We love serving others. We love, I think kind of what sums up us is we see the janitor. I know it's stereotypical, but not stereotypical. It's a cliche thing to say, but we see the janitor just like the CEO. So how important has community been to you? And even we've talked about it before, your ability to be a doctor, because I don't know if all doctors are very community oriented in their mindset, right?
Mm-hmm. As for myself, community plays a huge impact in my life. Growing up in my neighborhoods and the neighborhoods that I've grown up in, it's played a part in my life in terms of helping me become the person I am. It bridged and it fostered the person that I am today because of the influence that it had on me. Sometimes there were great influences, sometimes it wasn't as good, but the bad influences and the bad impact or the bad experiences that I had strengthens and fosters the person who I am. So in terms of in terms of community itself, we look at it now, and both yourself and myself are pretty big in giving back to the community and trying to advocate as much as we can for our community. And I think rightfully so, because we've got so much from that community. We were able to go out there and enjoy the sport programs that they had out there.
Yeah.
Some of the community events they have. We have the community festival that we have. So just little things like that brought smiles to our faces when we were kids. You look forward to that, and the community fostered that in you, and you were out there playing games and having fun and building memories because the community did that for us. And so we look back at it now, and that's why I put a huge emphasis, and through all my humanitarian work with the community here, and just the things that I like to do. It's not because I want to go out there and have my name out there and, I do this and do that. No.
Yeah.
It's because this community has fostered so much and has dedicated so much to myself that I'm very passionate to give back to that. And I don't feel like I'm giving back to the community. I believe that this is the rightful duty of a citizen here.
Wow.
Because you know what? We're all interdependent on each other, and the more we give, the more we'll get back from the community in this area. So I'm highly appreciative for all that the community has given me so far.
I like that perspective because, giving back to the community can sound very cliche, but you see it almost as like it's your duty, it's your job. And I think if more people had that mindset, we wouldn't see the other person as like a hindrance, or like, let's say this lineup to load our Presto card is, this person is taking too long to register for their programs. No, they're another human being that has a life, and they have their own, set of issues. And if we go and react in our natural flesh and see like, that, then we're disregarding them as a human person, right? As a person with, feelings, and we just see them as an annoyance, right? So I know even you talk about that in your ability to connect with patients, and how that's something that's really important to you, because if you don't have the community support, at the end of the day, you don't have people coming into your study or into your office, right? So
absolutely, it's sort of adapting, as well as trying to gauge your community and understand them. And if you were not a proactive person in your community, and if you don't understand your community, you'll never relate to them. With that being said, what really resonates with me is the fact that you say we treat janitors and CEOs the same way in our community, or the outlook that we have, and it's so true. I mean, there are some times that I was speaking to a janitor recently, and it's quite interesting because that janitor actually said something to me he says, "Oh, I'm just a janitor here." And I looked at that and I told him, no, I'm like, everyone's job is needed for society to function. It doesn't matter what job you have, as long as you're the best at what you do.
Yeah.
That's what's really important, that you're out there and you're doing the job that you want, or the job that you're doing to the best of your ability and capabilities. And I have so much respect for whether it be a janitor or whether it be somebody else that maybe society doesn't see as a extravagant job. I have so much respect for these people, because it's people like this that build the community, and it's people like this that truly understand what goes on in the community, and they are actually doing more to foster that relationship and build this community that others are doing. So
yeah, titles don't define your self-worth.
Absolutely.
Right. So obviously you're climbing this ladder. You're being you're studying to be a doctor, and you obviously have ambitions and goals. What is like the next step for you after you finish school? What are you planning to do?
Well, you just open up a can of worms here for yourself.
You have to decide now on this podcast, and if you contradict yourself, we will follow.
With myself, actually, I think we always have a plan, but things don't always turn out to that plan.
Definitely.
So I try not to set things in stone. And I try not to look at something and say, this is where I'm going to be 10 years from now. But I look at it as, here's where I would like to be, or these are some minor milestones I want to hit before I hit something major. So with myself, I know I love research. I've always had a passion for going back and doing another doctorate, a research-based doctorate. I've also wanted to do many other things. I'm a lifelong learner. I love learning. I love learning new things. That's just me. So anywhere that life takes me, I like heading to. So I know that I jump from a lot of jobs, as we spoke about earlier. I've jumped from many part-time jobs, and that was because I get bored in one place very easily. And so I think life for myself is a pretty boring life if we're not, we don't have that passion for learning new things. So I want to know how space works. I want to know how, the coffee maker that makes my coffee in the morning works. I'm very intrigued by little things like that.
Yeah.
And I think this gives me a overall view of everything, and it also gives me a greater appreciation for things, right?
For sure.
We're very ignorant sometimes, where we look at something and we think it's just one thing or the other. For example, painting. When my dad put me to paint once, and I'm like, this is so easy. I can paint no tomorrow. I started rolling, not too bad. Then I started doing the edges, and I realized that this is a tough job. My hands got very tired.
Yeah.
I had to be very precise with my lines. And it gave me a greater appreciation for that job. And I think that's with anything in life, right? You only have a greater appreciation or a good appreciation for something when you're more educated on it and you're less ignorant. And so I'm always striving to try to eliminate that ignorance.
Yeah. I like that because, like I said, not trying to make a broad sweeping statement, but we are real on the show. And and like you said, life is subjective, and it could be my own opinion, but sometimes you get the vibe that and not that you are defined by your title, but sometimes you get this vibe that some doctors just feel like they're all that, and like they're like, it's like us versus them. But I love your perspective, because you're like, I may be in a position where you're counting on me for your life, and I make a certain amount of money, but money or titles, they don't define you. Like you see this, like you see myself or anyone or a homeless person just the way you would see yourself, right? Like you're not going to define them by their current circumstance. So I appreciate that perspective that you have on life. So
absolutely. I think, you know what, it's really interesting, because there are times that we paint everybody with one brush. We say all doctors are the same, all lawyers are the same.
Yeah.
But you know what, I think sometimes people fall under this umbrella that they're very similarly classed because they're of a certain group or of a certain title. But I think that our past life and our upbringing shapes who we are, right? So my upbringing in my community shapes who I am, and it's strengthened me so much that I won't forget my community and where I come from in the community. Whereas somebody else may be neglected by their community and therefore have nothing but resentment when they become whatever they desire to become in life. So with that being said, I think it's a lot of the moralistic and ethical values of who you are is dictated by your societal upbringing, right? And it's indicative of how you're grown up and where you grew up. So I like that. And everything is subjective, right? So it's subjective to the actual upbringing of where you come from, and it's
For
also
sure.
subjective to how you perceive things in society.
Definitely. So you're this great guy with all these great qualities, and you know you're an intelligent person, an academic, and you kind of touched on it where like even though you can research, you know, your head off and like learn all these things, but sometimes the application of it might be different than you perceive. So what's something that you're working on at this moment in your life to refine yourself that you may not be have a strength in, but you're trying to work on?
For me, I work on many things, right? I'm working on many things at a time. And also the fact of identifying where I need to work on things, right? Because that's a big thing for me. Sometimes I look at things and
Being that self-aware.
yeah, just being self-aware. Sometimes you often neglect things. For example, I was recently at the gym and exercises that I've been doing for the last 6 years, and I think that I'm a professional in, I actually had somebody look at me and I was like, hey, can you critique what I'm doing? And they actually gave me some cues and they're like, you're not doing this or you're not doing
Yeah.
that. And I looked at them and I'm like, wow, I've been doing this the same my whole life.
Wow.
Or for the last 6 years of my life.
Yeah.
And I have never realized that I'm starting to build bad habits. So I think it's interesting because we don't identify our own flaws, right? So
Yeah.
sometimes our flaws are apparent, but just not apparent to us.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So other people can see it. So part of me is trying to reflect, and every evening I try to sit down and reflect on my day and what I liked about the day and what was not as desirable about the day, and
Yeah.
what I can change, what to make it better, and what I can keep. And I always look to try to identify some of my own flaws, right?
Definitely.
And how I can address that and pinpoint it. So it's quite interesting because nobody ever likes to find flaw in themselves. We look at something or somebody will say something and we're like, oh my God, that's not us. That's not true.
Yeah.
Very defensive and impulsive right away. But I think it takes a special subset of people to be able to identify, what's wrong and address that issue. And even if you can't address that yourself, find some way or some sort of avenue to help you address that issue.
Definitely. Yeah. That's what I usually often talk to my youth about is, and that's the thing, like sometimes as a youth worker, you can be like, you have this much of, level of experience, and life is subjective, as we keep saying. My upbringing might have contributed to why I think the way I think, and it's true, common sense is not common to all, but like I'll be like to my youth, I'll be like, you have to be able to come to a point in your life where you can critique the areas that you're wrong. And I mean, it doesn't feel good when you start critiquing yourself and saying, I'm wrong here, I'm wrong here, I'm wrong here. But what I tell them is, I feel like the greatest moments of refinement in my life where was out when I was just honest with myself, and I'm like, I have a weakness here, but that's okay because I can't do everything. I'm not, a superhero. I can't overcome or be the best in everything. But I think I don't know if it was Plato or Socrates or whatever, but they said, I'm wise because I know that I don't know. Right. And that's okay. That's why I always feel like people are trying to work on having these top 10 skills instead of working on the 3 that they're really good off of. So you can work in a team with people who have the other 3 that you're not that good off, but together you make a really solid team. Right. And that's okay to not be good at everything. But that acknowledgement itself is a huge area where you know that even through your growth and through things you're good and bad at, that you can be aware to say, hey, I need some work on this, or hey, I need to get better at this in general, right?
Well, jumping off your learning, it's or that comment about learning and identifying, it's similarly the case. So that the more I figure out the more that I learn now, the more that I figure out I don't know anything, right? I start coming to the realization the way I think I know things is not really the way that it's perceived to be. And it's interesting because you like to think that, oh my God, I'm getting all these titles and I'm getting all these credentials and maybe I'm reading all these books, so therefore I must be an expert at doing this. It's not true at all. I mean, it's just a drop in the bucket of knowledge. And the more I figure out, or the more that I learn, the more I figure out I don't know.
Definitely. And even with your I'm going blank. You're obviously you're an academic and you love research, but even with that, like, I guess school facilitates that. Obviously, you do your own personal research, which I give you credit for, because unless it's in an essay, I'm not doing research. But one thing I talked about this with one of my friends, and we both talked about, like she graduated now, and I'm still going through school, but we both talked about when we're finally done school, like, you feel like you're not engaged anymore. You feel like intellectually your brain isn't that stimulated. And it's like from age 4 or 5, you're starting school. Then all the way till your mid-20s, you might be in a that like your identity is being formed by what you're learning, and then it's like you almost have to come into the real world and be like, this is what life's about. I'm only working to wake up. But I think like how is that going to be for you? I mean, I guess you're always in the research field, but aren't you going to kind of miss that whole environment of just being in an academic setting and stuff like that?
Well, my solution to that is just never leave school.
Just
right?
never leave school.
I mean, hopefully we have some sponsors listening to the show and want to sponsor some of my future education. But no, I think it solidifies the importance of lifelong learning, right? And although we're done learning institutionally, I think that we're never done really learning, and we should always go back and refine our skills. And whether that be learning in the field, the respected field you're in, or in another field, it doesn't matter. It's learning, right? So I think that we have our due diligence as individuals and as people of society to kind of go out there and try to make ourselves more aware of other things, right? And to do that, we bounce upon the resources that, tying it back to community, that the community gives us, right? Whether that be seminars in the community or the library in the community, or something that the community offers that we can actually utilize to strengthen our knowledge of what goes on around us.
Definitely. So how has faith, if in any way, played a role into who you are as a person now or where you are today?
Faith is huge. I think my parents are religious people. We all are. And so our upbringing has even going to systemic places of worship, right? And growing up and just going out there, mosque, church, and being able to connect with community members around there. And for me, it's about inclusiveness, being inclusive with your community, right? I think that these places of religious worship help strengthen us as people and get a better sense of community, right? So sometimes we think we go there for maybe the religious aspect, right? But we get more than just the religious aspect. I think we get the religion, we get interaction with others, right? We get to gauge how people are feeling, we get to gauge how we're feeling, we get to express ourselves in certain ways. And like I said, I sit down every evening and I reflect, right? And part of my spirituality is sitting down and reflecting upon life and reflecting about my day and reflecting how I can make my day better, how can I be a better person, and how can I be a better person so I can better serve my community, right? So it's all this whole big bubble that, you come back, and so faith is huge. Faith is huge in terms of reflection. Faith is huge in terms of identifying who I am and what I want in life.
Yeah. And, not just to make I keep saying not just to make a brush, but, you never want to paint everyone, like you said, with the same brush. But one thing that I love, I mean, I talk about this with our friend MTS all the time, is that people have it in their heads that because you're a certain religion, that this is the type of person you're going to be. And, they look at the past failures of individuals who happen to be Christian or happen to be Muslim, and they're like, that's how all people are. But we're a testament on this show to say, hey, I'm Christian, you're Muslim, but we're not talking to each other differently because of our faith, but because we respect each other as human beings first, right?
Absolutely.
So
and I think, sorry to cut you off there,
no, it's okay.
I think that community solidifies that. Doesn't matter what communities are based upon, different religions, ethnicities, but we strengthen through these community events that you organize and that all of us are gracefully give our times to strengthen the ties between us as individuals and to take that barrier away or the religious barrier and the ethnic barrier. We look at people for who they are. Definitely. And especially at these bridging events and these community events. Soccer is soccer. It doesn't matter what religion you are.
So true.
It doesn't matter, what you believe in. It's the construct of the game,
Definitely.
right? So I think with that being said, community and the community events that we do and the upbringing of the community dictates a lot, and it kind of breaks down these barriers, right?
Definitely.
You have somebody that's maybe an immigrant family that's just moved into the community, and you have a family living here for the last 20 years or for their whole life. Does that make the immigrant family less of that community? No. We're strengthened by our community itself, and we're inclusive to everyone, especially this community of Malton. And I'm grateful to be living in a community like this where we're all so inclusive, and it's a small community, 40,000 people compared to the large cities out there. But
Definitely.
I feel like it's one example. As I remember digging weeds from my grass. I hate the dandelions. I was digging out the dandelions, and I was sitting there digging the dandelions, taking them off. I hate seeing them. And people were passing by. And people were saying, hello, how are you? And just like, good morning. And I went to Shoppers Drug Mart, the one at Westwood Mall over here. And I'll never forget it. There were people in the line. There was multiple people. People in the line. They're like, are you done taking out the weeds from your lawn? And I just never felt like a community, much so than that point in time where everyone was, did you finish take the weeds out, joking around? I felt like I knew the people in my community. And I think Malton gives us that.
That's awesome. So to wrap this all up, it's something I always like to ask all my guests. If you could go back in time, what would you tell grade 9 Riaz Mohammed just about to enter Lincoln Alexander? If you could warn him, if you could give him a word of encouragement, what would you say to yourself?
First of all, I'd love to say everything is subjective, but be who you want to be. Don't be afraid and don't be intimidated by people around you, because there's a lot of times people around you will say, well, that's not how things are done, or you shouldn't do things this way. But be who you want to be. Live life the way you want to live life, and don't have others dictate your life.
That's awesome. All right, so we've come to that time in the episode where we go into rapid fire. So I know that you're a huge. What do you call someone who likes conversation? Is it like a conversationalite or something like that?
I'm not too sure, but
so I don't know. For lack of a term, I guess because we're both conversationalites, that's gonna be our new term, the word phrase. We're gonna add it to the dictionary. But just be like, first thing that comes to your mind, or either or this. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
I know this is gonna be a challenge, but you'll do it.
I like to elaborate on things. That's why.
All right. Pepsi or Coke?
Neither.
Ooh. Okay. First, neither. Because we have a tally. I think Coke and Pepsi are tied.
I haven't drank Coke or Pepsi since I was 11.
Oh wow. Jeez. That's why he's a doctor. Because you're a doctor, Advil or Tylenol?
Neither. Haven't taken either since I was a baby, probably.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Now, WebMD or your own personal diagnosis?
Personal diagnosis.
For those who don't know, Riaz, you fractured your tibia, and the man did his own diagnosis, read his own X-rays, and he's just
I read my own X-rays because the radiologist said he'd come off with his report in a couple hours from then. So I was like, okay, I'll read it first before you tell me what you come up with.
That must be an amazing thing. Even with your family, my dad's a doctor, I never have to go see an actual doctor. So best thing about being a Doctor of Chiropractic student?
Helping people.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. Favorite place you've traveled, local or international?
France.
Awesome. Wow, that's actually a consistent one. We've had a few guests that went to the Eiffel Tower and stuff like that. Favorite book you read or are reading?
The Little Prince.
So no, say it in the French way.
Le Petit Prince.
Okay. All right. Google Translate. So favorite food?
My favorite food, pizza.
Pizza.
Yeah, pizza.
Favorite song right now or of all time, whatever.
Ooh, favorite song. That's a hard one. I've been rock stars, 21 Savage and Post Malone.
Okay. Favorite movie.
Favorite movie. That's a hard one. I'd say The Lion King.
Lion King.
Yeah.
Okay. My sister as usual is shooting gun signs in the back, but that's a Malton thing. Most influential person on your life.
Most influential person. Wow. This is getting pretty deep. I would say my mother.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So if you could go back to a single point of your life, what day would that be?
My birth.
Okay. Why?
I'd have more life to live, right?
For sure. If there was a documentary on your life, what would the title read?
Life is subjective.
Life is subjective. And if they didn't obviously cast you, let's say they had an actor to play the scenes for you, who would they get to play you?
Shamar Moore.
Okay. My sister, just long story short, my sister got shouted up by Shamar Moore on one of his personal videos.
Oh, wow.
So she's a huge Shamar fan.
Yeah, I look like him, don't I?
You do, for sure. If you could have coffee with anyone from any point in history, dead or alive, who would it be?
Gotta really think about this. Dead or alive, who would I have coffee with? Wow. It's a tough one for me. Very tough.
Anyone.
I would say maybe Albert Einstein.
Yeah. Just to pick his brain.
Yeah, just to pick his brain, see what goes on in his head, live a life of what he lives like.
Take notes. Do you say you're someone who works hard or works smart?
I would say it's a combination of both. Sometimes I work hard and then sometimes I work smart, but I find it's sometimes either one or the other, but I usually never couple them together. That's why I'm not as efficient, right?
You're adaptive. So if you could be any animal, or if there was an animal most like you, what animal would that be?
Otter.
An otter.
Yeah.
Why?
They're just crazy and wild, and they just run all around. And yeah, I used to be a sloth, but then I realized I'm not. I'm not slow and lethargic, looking like a sloth. So yeah, I go otter.
All right. So if you were stranded on an island, what 3 things would you want with you?
Oh, on an island, books, food, and I would say good conversation.
Good conversation.
Yeah.
Wow, that's an interesting one. So if you were a superhero, what would your superpower be? Would it be healing because you're a doctor?
That's a good one. I would say healing. That's
Like
a good. I didn't think of that, but yeah, I'll go with that one.
Okay.
It's better than the X-ray vision I was thinking.
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one too. So, can you imagine you just like never have to do an X-ray, like the practical way, just use your own eye?
Exactly.
I could tell your tibia is broken. So, what's something most people don't know about you?
Ooh, I would say that my ethnicity is Trinidadian.
Really?
Yes.
You're not a brown. You're not like an Indian guy.
I always get, "Are you Indian?" And I'm like, "Nope, not Indian."
Isn't it so annoying when people go like they'll try to guess where you're from and they'll be like, "I thought you were a Muslim." I'm like, "That's a religion, not
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
What job would you be horrible at?
Anything that has to do with multitasking. I suck at multitasking. So maybe a courier or any sort of like, I'd be the worst FedEx man ever, where I'm like, trying to scan packages and then drive and like try to go look at houses and listen to the GPS, and like couldn't do it. I can't multitask. I was playing a bingo game recently. I bought like a lot of cards and I just couldn't. I couldn't maneuver it.
So when you die, what would you want your biggest legacy that you leave behind to be?
I would say my biggest legacy is what I could provide to people. Leave them with something feasible and functional, whether that be teachings, whether that be establishment of institutions, educational institutions, or functional places for people. Just something that many people can benefit from. And I think that that's important, that as many people as possible can benefit from whatever I leave behind. And ideally, I want that to be places such as community centers and parks and, other things out there that a multitude of people can enjoy and not necessarily know it came from me, but just know that it's just a beautiful park or it's a beautiful place that they can be in and enjoy.
What show ended that you wish had another season?
What show ended? Well, the Game of Thrones didn't officially end, but it's going to end, I think 2019 is the last season, and I hope that never ends because it's a phenomenal show.
I've never rode the Game of Thrones
Oh
train,
my
but
God, you're missing
everyone's
out.
telling me that I should watch
You're
it.
missing out.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years? I know that's like the typical like interview question, but like where do you see yourself?
I see myself happy and amongst good people.
Where do you feel most out of place?
Where do I feel most out of place? That's a good question. Where do I feel most out of place? I would say with my younger cousins and with younger people. I feel I vouch to always be that person that's never gonna grow up in the sense that I'm always gonna be up to date with everything. And I find that now sometimes my younger cousins and things like that will come with these new devices and these apps, and they're like, try this, try that, and like slowly I'm phasing out social media right now. I feel like I'm getting left behind. So I think I'm the most out of place with the youth.
Wow. So something I ask every guest: if your life was a book, what's the current title of the current chapter of your life right now?
Title of the current chapter.
So if your book is called Life is Subjective, what's the title of the current chapter right now?
Oh, Finding My Way.
Finding Your Way.
Yeah. Because I think I'm just slowly progressing. I'm at that point in life where I kind of know where I want, and I'm a little bit more stable, but I'm not fully sure where that's going to guide me. So
for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So we reached that time in the episode where it's guest corner. So if anyone wants to contact you, or if there's a word of encouragement that you want to give the viewers or the listeners on the podcast, the floor is yours. So go ahead.
Well, yeah, absolutely. If you want to reach out to me, or if I can help you in any way, shape, or form, you can contact me at Riaz Mohammed at live.ca, or you can add me on Facebook, and I'm more than happy to help you.
And then when he gets his website up for his his office and all his business cards, we'll definitely send it out.
And come see me when you're looking for a chiropractor.
Yeah.
And for advice, I would say don't stop being who you are and embrace who you are.
Wow. Yeah. Awesome. Thanks for that. So that wraps up our show today. But just before we go, just wanted to give you a word of encouragement, because one thing that I really desired for this show is maybe on a bigger scale. We watch a lot of interviews of celebrities and people who are seen as macro, influencers, where as you look at us, we might be seen as micro influencers, but we're doing just as good, for humanity and for our community, but we don't always get the recognition. And I know you're not someone who goes and fishes for it, but you still need recognition, because I know you're a modest guy. So just to start with, like, your heart for humanity, like it not only allows you like to change the world around you, but it inspires people to want to change their perspectives and just to be more loving, around those who are around them. I think you just kind of like, there's like an aura of you that just emanates, and people just, like it's contagious. So I think even like it draws me to want to have more conversation with you, because it makes me want to be like, I want that kind of perspective on life. So that's something about you that I really respect. Your search for knowledge and your ability to exhaust all options, before saying something is not possible, is an asset that not only will allow you to exceed vocationally, but I believe will carry you further than most people in all aspects of their life. Another thing is you already are, but you'll continue to be such a huge blessing to the medical field. And I know that you won't just heal your patients physically, but your character and words will bless people emotionally. So that's something that I know you're going to do. And like I said before, your positivity and your joyful attitude is just, it's something that people want to be around. So I feel like your patients, your family members, your friends, the random stranger on the street is just drawn to you. And I think that's such a skill set beyond just what you're able to do with your hands, but just your character draws people towards you. You're never going to lack like patience. You're never going to lack, people wanting to come to you for advice. So I just wanted to encourage you with that. So.
I'm actually mesmerized by that. Thank you. That's very kind of you. I mean, I'm sitting here and I have goosebumps, actually. I mean, I don't like to take praise, like and I don't see myself as an extravagant person. But I'm highly appreciative for your kind words.
No, you deserve it, and I wish you only the best in whatever your future endeavors are, and all the things you're gonna do, and just saying that because he's gonna be my my chiropractic doctor. But yeah. So with that, I just wanted to say thank you for being on the show, and we'll probably do an episode 2. When you're actually you have your office opened up, and
I can shout out my business over there.
And then you can shout that out. Yeah.
I want to sincerely thank you for having me on this show, and thank you for all your works in the community. I wish you all the best with this podcast and with your initiatives with the community.
Appreciate that. Thanks for being on the show, Riaz.
No problem. Take care. Right.